Welcome to the Learning Can't Wait podcast, a Full Mind production. At Full Mind, our vision is to ensure every child has access to an exceptional education. Each episode, we will be joined by pathfinders within and around the education space who are bringing about transformational change on behalf of deserving students. I am your host, Hailey Spira-Bauer. Welcome back to the Learning Can't Wait podcast, everybody. I have a brilliant guest today, a former colleague of mine, Emmanuel George, Democracy Prep Public Schools, New York Regional Superintendent. Emmanuel, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Good to see you again.
I know we ran into each other at sunset on the rooftop in San Diego at a conference. And now a couple weeks later, here we are recording an episode of the podcast. I'm so glad you're joining.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I love running into people I know while I'm out and about in the education space so I can catch up on what they've been doing since we last were connected or working in the same space. So I'm going to start us off with my standard first question to have you share with everybody how you came to be the personal and professional version of yourself.
I think personally, the personal version of myself, I am a basic amalgamation of the people who had the greatest influence on me. My older brothers, I have two twin older brothers. One is a retired United States Army general, and the other is a NYU computer technician. And I think they're both exceptionally bright. I proudly say that I'm the dumb little brother, and I'm proud of this. I'm proud to say that, but they're also exceptionally humble. And I think that's something that really just shaped just me personally in terms of just making sure that on a day-to-day basis that you take in life as it comes, you treat everybody with respect. And you never you're never too big to acknowledge people or whatever the case may be. They're both exceptionally bright, both good guys, and they're both exceptionally humble and approachable, which is something that, given their professional asset, what they've attained professionally and who they are as people is, that's kind of rare. I think also my mom is someone who is an educator as well, and who is exceptionally smart, and who's also someone who taught me to be civic-minded, which kind of, in a way, is like kind of inspired my desire to join Democracy Prep. It's like always civic-minded, always talked about politics, always has CNN on in the background, which was torturous as a kid, but I definitely understand it now. And then for me, as an adult, I have the same remote battle with my son who wants to watch ESPN in the morning. We're both huge sports fans, and I want to watch the news. So I think it's something that just they stamp me as who I am. Also, I'm very fortunate to have a very close circle of friends who keep me grounded, and I love them dearly. And I just think for me, it's about keep me grounded and just remind me that there is always life outside of work, and and obviously my family at home as well too. So like those, being a dad, family guy, friend, family member, I think those, just the amalgamation of those factors just got me to help shape my own personality.
Sounds like you have some incredible people surrounding you who have really shaped the person you are today. And I'm sure if your brothers listen to this, they wouldn't be surprised based on how you speak about them, to know that they were so formative in your youth. Let's talk about, you mentioned super civic minded family, grew up with CNN in the background. Is that what led you to become a social studies teacher?
I think for me, I was just good at social studies when I was a kid, and then also for additionally, just I just liked it. I think it was I liked the way I was taught when I was younger. And then the news in the background did help because it helped give me context and background knowledge, and I always knew kind of random facts about things that would appear in textbooks, and it was like, oh, because I watch TV. And it helped kind of just broaden my horizon. So it did to an extent, but I it did. And I want to push myself. It did because I understood the importance of understanding the world around you. And I kind of took it with me.
I remember at the school that we worked at, there was a teacher. It was an election year, and there was a social studies teacher who was teaching the students about elections. This is middle school. Kids have big opinions, both from their own personal maybe ethos, but the ethos of their families. It was contentious, and it made me really question how teaching civics and social studies at middle school age, how formative it must be for their future approach to politics. You now run a large charter network in the largest school system in the country. What is the mindset that your network uses to teach students about civics?
I think Democracy Prep Public Schools has a really unique approach to civics education that is has been a bit of a forerunner that other schools have adapted and made their own. I think number one, we believe in direct participation. I think we want to. You can't you i- as young as kindergarten. When I first started Democracy Prep, kids would go out and encourage other people to vote, even if they could. They would go out, hand out leaflets, hand out flyers, participate. We always taught scholars were always taught about elections, about the election processes. Schools had student councils that were clear elections. The kids, we encourage student leadership. And when we teach politics, it's not from a opinion point of view. We all have opinions, we all have our views, but just teaching the system itself and teaching the ways you can participate in the system, whether it's through direct action. One of our capstone courses for our seniors was called at one time Change the World, where they literally had to create a capstone civics project that had to go out and execute to help change the world, whether it's directly providing testimony to the city council, taking action on police violence, raising money for domestic violence shelters, things that a wide array of things, but something that kids felt passionate about. So they understand the system itself, they understand how the system is applied, and then they understand how they contribute to the system as well. And then in the newer version of Democracy Prep, as we continue to evolve, it's more partnerships with other organizations, is going out into the community again and encouraging people to vote, is hosting political forums, having political candidates come talk to our scholars, things of that nature. We want to make sure that for us, like our kids, there is no boundary in terms of where they are versus who's famous and who has power. They have power in their voices. We want them to be in a room with people who hold powerful seats, but also exercise their own power as well too. My hope and my hope for Democracy Prep kids is that they start to hold smaller local elected and volunteer offices when in school. So I think like helping them join community boards and things of that nature, I think that's the next step we want them to be. I think you can't change the system or you can't make a system work for you if you're one, you don't participate, two, you don't know what the system actually is. And I think three, you can't communicate it to other people to have influence. And I think that's something that we're very clear about. And there are studies about the knock-on effect of the approach that we take. More our kids are more likely to vote. When they turn 18, they have to register to vote. That's the requirement. So it's like they're more likely to participate in voting. They're more likely. A lot of our kids come back to communities, work as community workers. A lot of them, we have a number of alumni out of schools that are teachers or work on the central office staff. They understand the value of community. And I think that's something that, like thinking about what you said about my mom and how I was raised, it was a natural connection that was forged incidentally. Like, oh, this is civics. Oh, we do civics here. Okay, that makes sense. And it's one of the things that makes our network stand out. And I'm really proud of it.
I was just going to say, you sound really proud of it, and you should be really proud of it. That is definitely not the public school education experience all over the United States, and it could be the public school experience. Is there a curriculum y'all have written that's public, or how, like what are you basing it off of? Is it content that you like cycles you repeat year over year? How do you structure it?
It's internally developed curriculum. We have a director of civic programs who spearheads a lot of the internal curriculum that is used at key points of the year for elementary, middle, and high schools around election, days of service, things of that nature. And then there's also built-in curriculum that's kind of in-house, but for our upper levels history classes where we Not only just the way they talk when we teach them direct engagement with the systems that they're part of.
Are you gonna have a watch party in November with your students?
Good idea. We should.
Yeah.
We
I
should.
mean,
That's a good idea.
again, going back to when I was a teacher, I did a watch party for a big election 8 years ago, with a social studies teacher, and it was like so different for me than had I watched it with another friend who wasn't a social studies teacher. Like it was really powerful to be able to talk about context and meaning and the interest of certain states, and I learned a lot that year having a watch party.
I think that's a good idea. I think that's something I would definitely want to bring to our schools. And
You heard it here first.
well, very first, well, apologize in advance to our principal. So
Yeah, seriously. Seriously, you're like, you thought you
it's
want to be with
coming.
your families
It's
tonight.
coming. So hey, we take
Yeah, yeah.
partnership, we
Um,
do ideas and
no,
run
but
with them.
this is when I think about what gets me excited about the future of education, it's evolution of this nature.
Mhm.
It's student-centered work that is authentic to the students and who they are and what's important to them and the lives that they live, not curriculum that's top down, written by people in an office thousands of miles or hundreds of miles away from the students in the classroom. And I know from firsthand experience that that makes all the difference.
Yeah, I mean, the last line of Democracy Press mission statement is for scholars to live a life of active citizenship, right? So when you start thinking about that, you have to experience it in school, passively through learning, just passive traditional learning, but also actively through direct action, through direct contact with officials, through direct participation, things of that nature. And I think it's important for regardless of political leanings or feelings, the the initial point of education itself was to develop a well schooled and well trained electorate. And I think as we get older and we hear about different parts of politics, people, whether they vote against their interests or not, people just want people to make an educated choice based off their beliefs and their feelings, and also based off what they know of the system. And I think one thing that incidentally, when you separate like work from friendship. But the one thing when we do have conversations, and some of my people I'm closer with or people I talk to outside of work say things that may not be right about the way certain things work, I always say that's why we need civics education in school, because you don't know what you're talking about. And it comes up in a way, it is kind of sarcastic, but there's a lot of truth in that as well. So that's something that we're very proud of.
I definitely didn't get a civics education growing up.
Yeah.
Say that with certainty. I could tell you there are three branches of government. I could tell you the checks and balances, but that's probably the limit of it. I had to do a lot of self education later in life.
A lot of us have to, and I think we want to make sure that our kids don't. I think we think about where we educate kids. We take kids from neighborhoods where the systems are kind of built against them, and where there's been historical disinvestment from the application of the New Deal to redlining to everything else. So our kids walking from environments in most cases where the odds are stacked against them because the system is
Structurally.
built that way.
Yes.
And I think for us, they have to learn those structures, learn those factors, so they know how to defeat it and make best use of it for themselves, and then come back and help the next person that's coming behind them.
Yeah. No, that's the way to make change. That is
Mhm.
sure the way to make change. Emmanuel, you're heading into it's just about summer. Not quite yet in New York, but we're getting there. We're inching closer.
Almost,
I,
almost.
I, I tell you, I work at coal mine, I work nationally, and some of my schools are done. They're like fully on summer
Mhm.
break. And I'm watching the New York schools like kind of make it to the finish line,
Churning through. Yeah.
turning through. And this was another challenging year. We're still feeling the effects of the pandemic and the mental health crisis for our students and our teachers. What are some topics that you are focused on for the next school year based on how this year went?
I think for us, there are a couple of things that really hit home. I want to look at it from just like stakeholders. I think number one, when you think about our parents and families, we have to make sure that we establish true partnerships with families. And what we mean by partnerships, from my perspective, is a lot of times when you deal with families, it's on the edges, whether it's okay, this mom is mad, she gets what she wants, or this mom's not going to say something, so you kind of slip things past her. No, you want to treat them as real partners. And what does that mean? It means that we're honest about our expectations, we're honest about ways that we can and will support, whether it's in school or being a conduit to resources that they need. And then we're honest about how we can serve your children in the best interest on a daily basis as partners. And they need to know what's going on in their kids' schools, and they need to have a voice to ensure that they can influence the schools appropriately whenever possible. And I think that's something that we do. With leaders, honestly, we develop our school leaders at Democracy Prep for next year now. Literally, our school leaders are taking a session, crisis prevention and intervention with the emphasis on trauma care, literally right now. And I think so when we're thinking about what I want for leaders is one thing the leaders of our schools is that want to be transformational leaders that think transformationally, not just transactionally, thinking big picture, thinking about the entire health of the school community, the academic health, making sure you have strong data practices, your health as a leader, the health of your staff, and then making sure that there are clear rituals and routines to ensure that your teachers are being developed the way they're supposed to. That's the focus for them. Focus for students is to make sure we provide them a healthy whole child experience where they have Moxie Prep has a really strong thriving arts program, burgeoning athletics program, without sacrificing the academic rigor that all of our schools want to that are beholden to. Want to make sure that kids can. Well, you can't beat the system as we talked about earlier with the D average. You know, you can't get into colleges that are going to pay for you if you have a D average and a 65s on Regents exam. So we have to make sure that they're prepared to enter the system and enter adulthood with, without having to incur as much financial liability to get to college. So we're going to make sure that. And I think for me, this continued partnership with the communities that we serve, community-based organizations, tenant associations, tenant organizations, making sure that we are good stewards to the partners that we're taking the most precious resource from a community is their children. We're taking your children every day and asking you to trust us. That we got to give something back. So, and I think that's something that we're very that we're going to continually be striding with. We can't do it alone. We can't educate kids by ourselves. We have to make sure that we hold the brunt of the bargain, but at the same time, we need to make sure that we partner with organizations that can provide support or can provide us guidance in particular cases with kids.
Let's talk about those partnerships for a second. It's funny because in interviewing a variety of different types of leaders in education, partnerships come up time and time again. I actually, my first teaching experience was at a community school, and so community schools are founded on the principle in the public sector of having that interplay.
Mhm.
What are your strongest partnerships like today that you have in existence, and how did you develop that? Like if we're creating a blueprint for folks that are newer to trying to create partnerships in their community, what would you suggest they do?
I think our strongest partnerships with organizations that provide direct support that supplements what we do have, or that provides gaps in areas where we may be lacking, but we do see a need. For example, we partner with a organization in East Harlem, GOSO, Get Out, Stay Out, right? There's an anti-violence prevention program, right? And they push into schools, some of our schools, and they provide supplemental services to some of our kids outside of school. It's important. They're an organization where I think it's a strong partnership. One, because one of the leaders of the organization has a family, it has a child at one of our schools. And so I think that's where we start. And I think they also provide a service that we need. Like, hey, if kids go astray outside of school, is there a safe affiliated space that we can talk to? Um, we made connections with like local reverends, local community leaders, sometimes local ethnic leaders as well. Sometimes we donate some of our public spaces for events. Even as we're taping today, within the next frankly, an hour from now, where a local reverend that runs a program called the Community Initiatives of New York is hosting Charlemagne the God from Power 105 on one of our campuses. Why? Because he asked. And because he's someone who runs an after school program that's violence prevention, that's centered on violence prevention, that some of our kids go to. And like, if we can donate space to ethnic groups to have events, donate space for local leaders to have events, donate space be willing to use our space to engage with community leaders. That's one way that we build partnerships over time. I think secondly, we're just willing to engage with people. I mean, people want to help schools. So a lot of times when people say, hey, I have an idea, I have a program, a lot of times it's a cold call. A lot of times it's people literally in the neighborhood who have a storefront. Talk to them. And I think that's where, me being a superintendent now, that's a title that people recognize. So I want to use it in a way, what I'm saying? So I want to use it in a way that helps us bring in more for our schools. So if it's ethnics, if it's an organization that provides support to Senegalese students, we have Senegalese students.
Right.
And I think that's something that we can definitely work with over time as well. And that's something that we're doing. I think if you are a leader or an organization that's seeking community partnerships, I think a few things that you need to do as follows. One, know what your weaknesses are. And not weaknesses in terms of what you deliver, but also weaknesses in terms of what your students present. You may have kids who come to school and do your work as asked, but they may be gang affiliated. Mm-hmm. You may need some gang prevention. I think, honestly, working with the NYPD very closely, which we've taught our leaders to do over time, has been exceptionally helpful. So if things do happen outside of school, the youth officers know our principals pretty well. And then we host them and we bring them into our building and have them talk to our kids, because we know there's a weakness that our kids come from some communities where there's some gang activity. That's just what it is now, right? So know what your weaknesses are, and then find organizations or staple organizations like the NYPD that can provide assistance outside. You can't do that right on your own. Two, if you have something that people can use, like for us, we have a couple of our schools have auditoriums, and we use it without really charging, because the reputation that you'll get will pay for itself. That's democracy prep. They're good. Oh, I got 3 nephews that want to go. Oh, you should go there. I know the superintendent. Do you want his number?
Yeah.
That helps. This is a school that helps. And I think that's something where if you have space, just set some parameters, let them use it. 3, be willing to engage. Be willing to engage, but just who are your local leaders? Who are your tenant association leaders? Who are your grocery store owners? Who are your local ethnic civic organizations that you can partner with, and just engage and talk with them and see where you can partner. Mm-hmm. What about, and then 4, find organizations that your kids do go to and offer the ability to partner. Like for me, one of our old parents from where we worked started the Harlem Jets.
I remember that.
Yeah. So if he started the Harlem Jets, hey, I taught your son.
Right. I have some kids that might want to play football.
Yeah, I have some kids that want to play football. You want to recruit kids.
Right.
Here are our principals.
Our goals are aligned here.
Yeah. Our goals are aligned. We're having a block party, set up a table. Like those are the things that you can do that don't really cost anything, but a little bit of ingenuity, creativity, and humility.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny. You just named humility, and I was going to say that. Like, I love how you called out your brothers as being humble at the top of this podcast. And it doesn't seem like the apple falls far in terms of the sibling relationship here, because you are saying you have to be humble. Figure out what your weaknesses are, ask for help. Luis Torres, the principal of PS 55 in the South Bronx, has come on a few times and talked about hustle culture. And how if you want these partners, and he was the community school leader I speak about, he was my first principal. If you want partnership to happen, You need to be willing to help others and you need to ask for help. Like you can't be shy about saying, here's something we need.
Yeah,
Here's
this
something my students need, right?
indeed. Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the curriculum and the structure of how you're thinking about the whole child. Let's talk about democracy prep teachers for a second. Talk to me about what you look for when you're recruiting a teacher for democracy prep. Like what are the characteristics, the strategies, or excuse me, the skills, the mindsets that are important in your recruitment process?
I think the most important um, s- mindset, skill, or characteristic that any teacher could have is a willingness to be coached and a willingness to grow. I mean, second, content knowledge, obviously. I mean, that's a close second. But if you have content knowledge and a closed mindset, it's just not going to work for you. I mean, let's if you may start off pretty well, but if you're not willing to grow, if you have a fixed mindset, this is not going to work for the long term. Like, yes, you can teach and be smart, but if you're above getting feedback from a principal, you don't take coaching meetings seriously, you think you're above PD, at best you're going to be average.
Mm,
At best, you're going to get average results. That's only if you're really talented, or
right.
if my lesson plans from when Obama was president are good now. Like that's just not going to work. So I think we want teachers who are willing to grow and to be coached. And I think a lot of times when we are in like when you're in the interviews, I think sometimes the demo lesson is always important, but just as important is what's the response to feedback.
Oh
And
yeah.
and then obviously you pair that with content knowledge, and then you pair that with an understanding of the plight of the kids that you teach. Like you're not going to save the hood by yourself. So just stop. Like if you're not gonna the
This
dangerous mind,
isn't this isn't a movie. This is
yeah, that dangerous mind stuff.
yeah,
That's just not
we
real.
yeah.
That's not real. But I do believe that you have to understand why you're important as an educator to kids that come from these communities that we strive to serve, given the systemic drawbacks that they have to fight against every day. And why and our kids are products of communities that don't have enough banks, that don't have enough green space, where wealth is not built, where fresh food is harder to come by than sneakers or hookah. So you have to really think like why are you here? You're not here to save the day. You're not going to save kids by yourself. And kids can smell that a mile away, but they understand if you are prepared, that you respect them and you understand why this education means a lot more to them than maybe some other communities where that's just a given. It's a given that you're starting off going to a school like William and Mary, and you're just trying to get into Harvard,
Right.
right? So as opposed to our kids, where we tell our models really work hard, go to college, change the world. We have to tell people that.
Right.
In some cases, people are born knowing that. So you have to understand how you're part every day. The idea, understanding that rigor is equity is a civil right. Like
Yeah.
that preparation matters. That you have to be prepared to teach kids. Now you can't just go in there and wing it. You have to understand that if a kid falters, your job is to pick them up and help them along the way. That's what I mean by education. You have to understand why it's important, and your actions need to match that. So you have to come in, be willing to be prepared, and be willing to challenge kids, and don't and have expectations of them that are very high yet reasonable, and you provide the supports.
Listen, I care a lot. I question a lot about what people are looking for in teachers. And I think that you hit on a couple of points that really resonate with me. One is in life, I don't want to be around people that don't think they need to improve. Like we all need to recognize that we could grow and be better from the people around us. And most importantly, in the classroom.
Yeah,
Uh, I could think of master teachers who I've observed who were asking me for feedback when I was 22 years old. Like, hey, Haley, what'd you see in my classroom? What would you do differently? Like anything that you caught from a student that I didn't catch, like that set the tone for me when I began my career about what kind of teacher I wanted to be. That really hits for me. The other thing that really hit for me here too, I mean, is obviously mindset. I think, especially in communities that have been historically oppressed, you need to really be clear about what your job is and what your role is and who you are in that space. And I don't think that can be taught.
You know, you have to come.
Is
You have
that
to.
controversial to say?
No, you can't. You can't. No, it's not. You have to come with it, and if it's not there naturally, if you have a sense that something is wrong, like when we first started teaching it, remember say I believe in social justice, and I was like this catch-all phrase,
Yeah.
but you have to thin slice that now and understand what does that actually mean and how do you apply it every day in your work. And the one thing I tell, like when I talk to the new teachers in democracy prep every year, like as the start, and I was like, you are tangentially a civil rights worker.
Hmm.
You're giving the kids an essential civil right.
Hmm.
So welcome to the struggle. You know what I'm saying? And I
Right.
think
Yeah.
you just have to say it because that's what it is. Like you're providing, you're helping kids gain a civil right that is not accessible to everyone based off their zip code.
Correct.
So I mean, so you have to understand what does that mean? It doesn't mean a sticker on your computer, a bumper sticker on your car, or a sweatshirt that you buy off of Etsy. That means doing the small things that matter every day that show in the quality of your work, making sure that you're prepared, making sure that you challenge kids, making sure that you support kids, making sure that you acknowledge kids, and making sure that you treat them fairly. If they screw up, they need to be consequenced, but then restored back to their original state. If they do well, they need to be rewarded and then restored back to their original state so they can be prepared to do it again. I think those are the things that matter. It's like if you can put all the stickers on your computer if you want to. If you're not prepared to teach a kid today and you expect them to sit in your class for an hour and look at you wrestle with yourself on how to figure out what they're going to learn, you're not respecting them and you're not respecting their learning. So, and I think those things matter. And I think that's what we have to build into people if they don't have it naturally. But you're right, you can't learn it, but you can accelerate and help build into them. So they say it's to help them give a clearer perspective.
It also goes back to your coachability thing, right?
Yeah,
Like you have to be willing to hear that you're messing up. You have to
yeah,
also be willing to know that your actions have consequences. And if someone tells you that, that's not going to cause you to retreat completely.
yeah. I tell them every day I'm a superintendent. I do something bad before 10 o'clock every day. I make a mistake the day before 10 o'clock, but I try not to make the same mistake twice. And
Right.
I'm always willing to get feedback and learn. There's no social order for intelligence. It's just there's no social order for right ideas.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Emmanuel, you actually answered my last question already, but I'm gonna ask it and see if you want to add on to it at all. My last question is, what advice would you give a teacher starting their career today? I love what you said about this is civil work. Like you are doing civil rights work as a teacher. Is there anything else you would add to that for teachers who are maybe on break right now by the time this
Mhm.
episode airs, but are about to start teaching? They just finished school, they're ready for a class.
Teaching is art and it's not a science. That's why you get a bachelor's of arts in education. And art is something that is always evolving and open to interpretation. So you have to consistently study, you have to consistently be open to new ideas, and you have to be consistently adaptable. And I think you have to have a willingness to be consistently prepared. You can't fake it. I mean,
They
kids
know.
they
Oh,
sm-
yeah.
they will smell it on you and they will tell you. Then they will, and if they don't tell you, they will tell your principal. She doesn't know what she's doing.
Mhm.
They'll tell you. So and it's not always the kids that have the highest grades in the class. A lot of times it's the mid-level kids who will look at a teacher and say, she's not prepared today. And then they
Right.
will drift off. And if they
And then you've lost them.
yeah, you lost them. And then depending on their own self-control, they're making the judgment of whether they get in trouble or not, because you have no influence in that because you really don't even know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I think it's important. The preparation piece is hugely important, but also it weaves into the idea that teaching is art. when I started teaching, I taught on an overhead projector, and my clothes had chalk dust on them. We've come a long way from.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's that's just.
Some people listening are like, what is that?
People like,
What's an
it's
overhead
overhead projector.
projector?
Yeah.
I know chalk because my kid plays with it outside, but
Yeah. I wrote on a green chalkboard with a yellow piece.
100, and you use the wet paper towel or the wet sponge to wash it off.
At the end of each day, you had it,
Yep.
because you didn't want your board to have streaks in it.
Nope, it had to be clean. Emmanuel, thank you so much for sharing your journey in education and the work you're doing at Democracy Prep today. It has been an honor to interview you.
It's been an honor to be on here with you again. Thank you so much. I'm glad we reconnected. Appreciate it.
Here. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who tuned in to listen today. Thanks for listening to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and share this episode. Be the first to know when we have a new episode by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have a suggestion for an episode, email us at podcast@fullmindlearning.com.